This is a comprehensive guide on how to beat Act 4 solo in Modern Warfare Zombies without any glitches or exploits. If you're struggling with the Worm boss fight, skip to this timecode on screen to jump straight to that. If not, we'll cover what items to spawn into your game with, how to grind contracts sufficiently to maximize your points, what to bring into the Dark Aether, and what to do in the Dark Aether before the boss fight. Setting up for this boss fight is going to require a lot of points, and everything you spawn with should try and make that point grind as efficient as possible. My operator has a large rucksack to let me spawn in with more items, and having a kill streak, 3-plate armor vest, and self-revive means there are fewer things I need to earn in my game. I don't have a gas mask in this build, and honestly, you don't need one, though it can be nice if you plan on clearing Aether nests and infected strongholds, which we'll talk about more later on. For weapons, I picked a mobile SMG and melee secondary to maximize mobility in the early game. I see a lot of people opt for the RGL grenade launcher for this fight, and while it's great for the soul chests in the Dark Aether, it's entirely unnecessary for the boss fight. If you maximize your points and max out one weapon, you won't need it. A legendary triple packed weapon will shred through any zombies in this fight, and the additional mobility of the knife is incredibly valuable at all times. We'll talk more about weapons later on since we won't keep that SMG when it's time for the boss fight. Your lethal and tactical grenades don't matter for the boss fight whatsoever, so use whatever you're comfortable with. Decoys are still good distractions despite the nerf, and I like Semtex to deal with riot shield mercenaries I encounter, though throwing knives are also a popular choice for single target damage against high tier zombies. Field upgrades are where I see a lot of people going wrong. Field upgrades aren't a viable option for damaging the boss, so upgrades like Energy Mine, Frost Blast, and Tesla Storm are out. Aether Shroud is decent, but the duration is way too short in my opinion. Healing Aura is good for quick health regen, but in my experience, the undisputed champion of this fight is Frenzied Guard. Because so few zombies spawn alongside the worm, there aren't many chances to replenish your armor, so bringing a fully charged Frenzied Guard into the fight is like having 3 extra plates of armor for free. Plus, if your armor is soaking up all the damage you take during Frenzied Guard's duration, you'll have enough time for your health to regen naturally. Healing Aura may be great for cross-map revives if you're playing in a group, but for solo players, Frenzied Guard is the clear best choice. For the items in your rucksack, you want items that will minimize the amount of points you need to earn before entering the Dark Aether. In my case, that was a refined Aether Crystal as well as every other perk in the game except for Elemental Pop. These items will be the most player dependent since not everyone has every single schematic, but I made a conscious decision when routing the strategy to avoid any schematics found in Tier 3 or the later story missions. None of the schematics I used were from Tier 3. The Quick Revive schematic is in Act 1 of the story, and while Death Perception is in Act 3 of the story, it's not at all necessary to have for the boss fight. Every other perk schematic is from either Tier 1 or Tier 2, so they're very easily grindable in solo. Tombstone cans and refined Aether Crystal schematics can be found in Tier 3, but I did not use schematics for those. These are items that I found while playing in the game, and the only reason I didn't use a raw Aether schematic instead was because it was on a cooldown. I've earned the setup I made it to the boss fight with in this gameplay without those items multiple times before. Once I spawn into the game, I instantly use all of my perk cans and only my perk cans. Do not use the Aether Crystal, we're saving that for later. The first goal is to grind enough points to get a legendary assault rifle out of Tier 3, which can cost as much as 5,500 points. The easiest way to earn all of those points quickly is by doing cargo delivery contracts. Because you're ever only fighting mercenaries during those contracts, your weapon's rarity and pack-a-punch tier does not matter, meaning you can do all of these in Tier 1 or Tier 2 with a base rarity weapon. A lot of people will exploit this game's awful AI to kill the chopper that spawns during this contract, but it's actually really easy to simply avoid taking damage without the exploit, which saves you a ton of time. So just ignore the chopper and book it towards Fang for the pickup. A decent alternative for this are the Weapon Raid and Outlast contracts in Tier 1. I would do one of these before driving to the other side of the map for another cargo contract. The only thing to keep in mind is your weapon's weak power level. I strongly advise that you avoid big bounty contracts for now, and avoid ground station and Aether extraction contracts because mercenaries aren't fun. You should only need to do 2 contracts before having the money to afford a legendary weapon, and at that point you need to find the nearest car, drive into the high threat zone, and start looking for wall buys. Anything that isn't legendary, aka the orange rarity, isn't worth your time. But the weapon itself does come down to personal preference so long as it's decent at range. Assault rifles are the best balance between damage, output, and mobility, but light machine guns are a good alternative, and marksman rifles are fine if you have a good trigger finger with a lot of stamina. Once you have your weapon of choice, you can immediately use whatever Aether Crystal you brought into your game on that legendary weapon and start grinding contracts in Tier 2. The best contracts to grind at this point are the Cargo Delivery, Weapon Raid, Outlast, and Big Bounty contracts. Weapon Raid and Outlast contracts are really consistent as far as time and completion rate goes, and you'll also get some additional points for all the zombies you kill during the contract. The Big Bounty contracts are going to start off as the hardest of the 4, but as you get more Pack-a-Punch tiers on your weapon, they're going to become the easiest contracts for you to do. But the Cargo Delivery contracts are the most important contracts to manage and do well. Beyond being easy contracts to do, they also give you consistent access to cars that make getting around the world infinitely easier. Getting around quicker means less time between contracts, and that ultimately means more money. The location of each contract is obviously a big factor in your decision making, but the status of your vehicle is going to play the biggest role in what contracts you prioritize. While you're doing these contracts, you should also be popping your head into infected strongholds and Aether nests to try and find valuable loot in Aether-infused chests. These are always really quick side objectives to do, and while not the best financially, the loot in each one can often make up for the opportunity cost. And luckily for you, Aether nests are often located in the gas stations that your cargo delivery contracts start at. Also remember to open the cash registers for quick and easy money. These point drops may not seem like much at first, but over the course of a full game, they definitely add up. Speaking of loot, the best items to get are going to hands down be self-revives, for obvious reasons. With my strategy, I didn't need nearly as many as I brought in, but if you're watching this video, there's a good chance you've already struggled to beat this boss for a while, so better safe than sorry. Everything other than self-revives are actually a little iffy. The deadbolt turret circuits are really powerful and popular, but the turrets aren't guaranteed to spawn during the fight, so you could end up with 3 items that don't do anything. Kill streaks like sentry guns basically do the same job as those deadbolt turrets, but I was able to handily beat the worm with only 1. Most of the time it's going to target the 1 or 2 zombies in the arena instead of the boss itself, and with a weapon this strong, I'm not sure how much a juggernaut suit really matters. And like I said at the beginning, your throwables don't really matter all that much in the boss fight, so monkeys and Casimirs aren't actually all that helpful. Another thing you might consider is getting an allied hellhound. I tried that once, but he completely disappeared before I made it to the first Dark Aether seal. He spawned in with me, I pat him on the head 3 times to tell him he's a good boy, and I got an achievement for it, and when I made it to the first seal, he wasn't there and I never saw him again. An allied hellhound would make self-revives a lot less of a crutch, but I have a hard time recommending one if they can just glitch out like that, especially since getting a tier 3 allied hellhound takes up so much of your inventory. But my biggest tip for this part of the game is to know what you need to enter the Dark Aether with and enter as soon as you have it. The game is really unstable right now, so once you have a maxed out weapon and a collection of great gear, don't hesitate to enter the Dark Aether right then, even if you still have time left. I had so many games where I was set up at the 10-minute mark but pushed just a little longer only for my game to crash. The game and servers seem to run really well in the Dark Aether portion of the map for whatever reason, so crashing isn't something I would worry about once you get there. Just make sure you get there. Once you're ready to enter the Dark Aether, come to this small island outside of the high threat zone and interact with the portal. Once you've interacted with the portal, you need to confirm by opening your tac map and vote yes on the Dark Aether rift on the top right of the screen. I know why this is here in co-op, but you also have to do this in a solo game, and I have no idea why. I actually went down my first time trying this boss fight because I didn't know about that, so don't be an idiot like me. Once you enter the Dark Aether, you'll have to fill 4 soul boxes before fighting the boss. They're marked on your map, and if you have a legendary triple packed weapon like you should, then this is a really easy first step. The zombies in this part of the map are only tier 2, so whatever weapon you have should kill them in only 2 to 3 shots. This is also a good time to use any throwables you might have since they're not very useful against the boss. And if you do use them, be sure to refill any inventory slots with armor plates. Just about every zombie in this section will drop an armor plate, so there's no reason not to pick them all up when you're done. Once all 4 soul boxes are full, you can make your way to the final waypoint and start the boss fight. Literally is a word I don't use lightly, but literally every complaint I've seen about this boss fight comes from people who clearly don't understand the fight's mechanics. Gorm'gant isn't like other zombies boss fights, where the big baddie just sits there silently while hundreds of regular zombies come and attack you. This is a boss fight where the boss is the threat, and that means you have to learn his attack patterns. Learning these attacks is the key to success, which is why we're covering them first. The first of 5 attacks gorm'gant has is a laser attack. This attack starts with the worm's head looking straight up at the sky before a beam of light starts emitting from his mouth. At that point, he brings his head down and fires a laser in a straight line forward. You can avoid this attack by sidestepping in either direction, but it's important that you do this quickly so you don't get hit. All of Gorm'gant's attacks happen fairly quickly, but if you learn to recognize his obvious attack windups, they're all completely dodgeable. Gorm'gant's next attack, which is a slam, is very similar to his laser attack. This one starts exactly the same, with the worm looking upwards towards the sky, but is immediately followed by him slamming his head down where you're standing. You'll also see the edges of your screen go black during this attack, which is an immediate indication that this is the next attack. This one happens way faster than the laser, but is avoided in the exact same way. Move either to your left or to your right and you can avoid this one. Just be sure to do so quickly or you're going to take a lot of damage. You also have to move much further away in either direction than you would with the laser, since the worm's head is much wider than the laser. I feel like that goes without saying, but I feel like most of this fight should go without saying, and here we are. So you gotta move. Gorm'gant's remaining attacks are causing the most frustration in the community right now, but they're not nearly as bad as that community would have you believe. The third attack is his orb projectile attack. The worm generally starts this attack facing in the direction of the player and lets out a roar that shoots 4 purple balls of lightning out of his mouth that fly behind the player before attacking them from behind. These orbs do a fair amount of damage, and if left unchecked, they will keep dive bombing the player until killed. But the real threat is that the orbs can take your focus away from Gorm'gant, who, reminder, is still the biggest threat in this fight, and give the worm a window for an uncontested attack. These orbs are the biggest skill check in this entire fight, and it's one that most people are failing miserably. But once you know how to counter this attack, it's actually probably his least threatening. So here's what you need to do. When this attack happens, continue focusing fire on the worm for 4 or 5 seconds before then turning around and quickly taking out all 4 in a nearly perfect line. What you're doing here is you're letting the orbs get closer to you and dealing with them when they're actually threatening. And by doing this, you're A, continuing to damage the worm, which is helpful for obvious reasons, and B, you're always aware of what the worm is doing and, if you've learned his other attacks, how to counter his next move. The goal is to minimize the amount of time you're focused on anything other than Gorm'gant, because the orbs aren't a threat when they're 500 feet behind you. So why turn your back on the worm and focus on the orbs when the worm is going to slam you if you do that? There's a bit of timing to dealing with the orbs effectively, but with a bit of practice, you can get this one down in no time. Gorm'gant's final damaging attack is another big skill check that a lot of people are failing, and that is his burrow attack. This attack starts with the worm looking up at the sky again, but this time his long wormy body will shimmy from side to side as the worm starts to go underground. Once underground, the worm will dig around completely randomly searching for the player. If the worm doesn't find a player, he'll eventually pop back up to the surface and you can continue the fight. Sometimes he'll find the player and only clip the side of them, which does a bit of damage, but unless there are unchecked orbs flying around, it's not damage I would be too worried about. But the skill check with this move is when Gorm'gant finds you and hits you cleanly, because then he swallows you. A lot of people do not understand how this attack works. I did not understand how this attack works at first, and there's a good reason for that we'll get to. This is not a one-hit KO move like a lot of people believe. Once you're in the worm's mouth, you can A, continue shooting, which is helpful for obvious reasons, but B, and this is the real important part, once he spits you out, you have about a quarter second to deploy your parachute and float back down safely and alive. Something a lot of people don't seem to understand about this fight, and something I did not understand about this fight when I first tried it, is that you don't die once you've been eaten. You die by hitting the ground at such a high speed. So if you deploy your parachute in time, the only damage you'll take is from being chewed a bit, and it's honestly not all that threatening. And a quarter second may not seem like a lot of time, but you can just spam whatever button you use to deploy your parachute and be perfectly fine. On Xbox, the button is A, on PlayStation, I believe it would be X, and on PC, by default, I believe it's space bar. Another thing to know about this attack is that sometimes you come out and there are Aether orbs flying around the map even when the arena was empty before, so take a quick look around once you've been freed. That might be a little difficult to do since the game seems to like you have you leaning to one side after you've been freed before slowly resetting you upright after a couple seconds, but once you're upright, take a quick look around. There's also a version of the slam attack where he eats you as well, but once you've been spit out, you can survive by spamming whatever your parachute keybind is, just like before. While he's underground searching for you, this is a really good time to do things like applying armor, killing any remaining Aether orbs you might have missed, shooting a stray zombie or two, picking up some ammo, calling in a kill streak if you have one, or anything like that. This is probably the only moment of peace you'll have in this entire fight, so cherish it. One annoying thing about this attack is that you can't damage the worm while he's underground, and that could be really annoying if you're low on time, but the timer is so generous that something else would have had to have gone wrong for it to be a problem. One of those things that can go wrong is his final attack. Well, attack in air quotes, because his final move is actually a healing move. His healing move seems to be very rare in my experience. It usually only happens if you move too far away from the boss arena, and they do sometimes consider that road next to the beach to be too far away. The move starts above ground in the exact same way as the burrow attack, but once underground, a giant Aether swirl will be above ground, and his health will go up in chunks. This one's pretty simple to break. Either shoot the purple swirliness a bit or get close enough to it, and gorm'gant will pop right back up. Obviously, you never want to see this move, but if you've managed the fight well up until that point, you can still win even if it heals. So now that you know what the boss itself can do, you kind of already have a pretty good idea of how to defeat it. If you went through the Act 3 story mission, you've already fought one of these worms before, and you take this one down in the exact same way. You can shoot the worm anywhere to deal damage, but you want to specifically target these 6 glowing spots on the side of the worm. These are the areas where you can deal critical hit damage, and the critical hit damage is actually pretty insane. This is a very tanky boss, so highly recommend shooting those at all times. After a while, these 6 areas will explode and you'll have fewer targets to shoot at for critical damage, but you will definitely kill him before you destroy all 6, even if he heals. Beyond that, it's just a matter of dealing damage while dodging his attacks. The skill of this fight comes down to learning his attack patterns and how to react to them. You know, like every boss fight in every video game ever. This is also a fight that's totally okay to fail a few times. Even with this strategy, the fight is still pretty challenging, and sometimes you have to play a couple times to really understand it and get the experience needed to win. So keep going. I'm rooting for you. Once you do eventually kill the worm, it will drop some loot where he died, and an exfil portal will spawn alongside a reward portal with an item that you need to pick up for the Dark Aether Easter egg. Be absolutely sure to pick this item up. You will need it to return to the Dark Aether later to unlock what are essentially tiers 4 and 5. Once you're ready to leave, interact with the exfil portal, a cutscene will start, and you'll be done with Act 4. That's all you need to do to complete Act 4's story, but there's a short Easter egg afterward to unlock the ability to earn sigils and elder sigils and re-enter the Dark Aether. And since we already got one of the items, I figured I'd quickly show you how to get the other 3. There are 4 golden items that you need to return to the Dark Aether. One of them is the golden diary you got for defeating gorm'gant, and the other 3 can be earned in any future games of Modern Warfare Zombies. The steps required to earn these items are challenging, so I highly recommend repeating the early game setup from earlier in this video to get another triple packed legendary weapon before attempting this. You also don't need to earn all 3 items in a single game, and all of them can be deposited into your stash just like anything else you find in game. You just need to have the room for it, which might actually be a little tricky. 10 is not a lot of stuff for your stash. These challenges can be done in any order, but we'll start with the easiest of the bunch, which is, in my opinion, the pill bottle. For this, you need to find an Aether nest, not an infected stronghold, but an Aether nest specifically, and once you get there, you need to shoot assist once with the brain rot ammo mod. Then interact with assist to drain it, and once it's done, it will explode and drop a purple pill bottle. From there, you need to find an Aether tear, enter it, and then enter the green Aether tear in the sky. This green Aether tear will only spawn after entering the Aether tear, so no redeploy drones or anything like that. Once you do that, a special contract will fall from the sky, and you need to activate that contract. This contract has you kill an HVT mimic, and once you do that, it will drop the golden pill bottle. Next is the second easiest item, which is the CCTV camera. You need to find an Aether orb somewhere on the map, shoot it with dead wire so it turns gold, and then kill the orb. Once it's dead, a purple CCTV camera will spawn that you need to pick up. From there, it's basically the same format as the last challenge. You need to find another Aether tear, enter it, pull your parachute, and then enter this now orange Aether tear in the sky, and pick up the contract that spawns. This will task you with killing an HVT disciple, and once that disciple is dead, you can pick up a golden CCTV camera. Last but not least is the hardest of the 3. The dog collar. You need to find a doghouse somewhere on the map, put either a thermite or molotov where you would normally put the meat to get a friendly hellhound, and then kill the hostile hellhound that spawns from the doghouse. Once that hellhound is dead, it will spawn a purple dog collar that you need to pick up. From there, find another Aether tear, enter it, pull your parachute, enter this red Aether tear in the sky, and pick up the contract that spawns. This contract has you kill an HVT mangler, and once you do that, it will drop the golden dog collar. Once you have all 4 items, you need to go to this small island just outside side of tier 3 and place the items in the following order. The diary goes in the cryo-freeze plinth on the far left, the pill bottle goes in the brain rot plinth on the middle left, the CCTV camera goes on the dead wire plinth on the middle right, and the dog collar goes on the napalm burst plinth on the far right. So once again, from left to right, that's diary, pills, camera, dog collar. Left to right, diary, pills, camera, dog collar. Once you do that, an HVT Mega Abomination will spawn alongside some zombies that you need to kill. Once the HVT is dead, it will spawn a sigil in the reward portal, and at that point, you are ready for the endgame in tiers 4 and 5. And that's where this guide is going to stop, since this was about defeating Gorm'gant and getting through Act 4 solo without exploits and not about grinding the endgame. But if you want to see me make a dedicated guide on how to survive in tiers 3, 4, and 5 completely solo, let me know by dropping a like on the video and subscribing to the channel.